Every year, 51,000 homes are burned because of electrical fires, and 200 people die each year from home electrocutions. That's roughly 4 people a week or every other day. My parents thought I was determined to increase that number by 1. So I grew up in a shitty farmhouse way the fuck out in the country for a while. As halfway, you're going to love these names. You know you're out in a place when the nearest town was called Zanesville. Our mail came from another town that's like 10, 15 miles away called Yoder. That's like Yoder with an E-R at the end. And we lived on Pine Road, which was pine with an R in it.
Hey, it's Ray the editor. I'm going to cut in here for a second. And Robert doesn't know I'm doing this, so, keep it to yourself. He never told me where he was from as a kid. I don't know what state. So, on my Google, I think I found that it was Ohio. If we look at my screen here, we have Yoder, Ohio. Okay, he talked about that being 10 to 15 miles away. Now, if we zoom out of Yoder to kind of get our bearings in Ohio, we have one of the bigger cities, Bellefontaine, and then the biggest landmark is Columbus right here. So if we look at Zanesville that he talked about, here's Zanesville. We zoom out, Columbus is right here. So Yoder would be way up here, nowhere near. So I don't think it was Zanesville, but in looking up Zanesville, I found Zanesfield. Now Zanesfield is right here next to Bellefontaine. So Yoder is going to be kind of up here in this area, because if we go back to Yoder, Bellefontaine is right there. So it might have been that. But when I looked up Zanesfield, I found Waynesfield. And Waynesfield, if we zoom out, Yoder is just right there. I have no clue where he's from. So, again, this was a long time ago, so I'm not going to blame him for not remembering. And I could have easily just texted him and say, hey, did you mean one of these, or could you clarify? But I think this was more fun. Anyway, I'll let him get back into his story.
So, nothing is spelled or easy to pronounce anything making fucking sense. So you're out in BFE. And this house was old. I mean, really old. The rafters in the ceiling and the roof, you could see were just trees that had been planed off on the 2 ends, and they just nailed shit to that way. The electrical throughout the whole house was something called knob and tube, which is where they just put like little ceramic knobs on the wall, and they separate the wires with wires running in between. They're ideally rubber insulated. These ones were way before they invented rubber, I guess, because they were paper wrapped wires. So someone decided that the best way to keep electrical wires from arcing against each other is to wrap them in flammable paper. Because it was paper, and then they coated it in oil. That's called a wick. That's called a wick tied to every rafter in your house. Smart idea. But that's what they did back in 1800s, 1820s, somewhere back then. And that would all hook up into a fuse box. No, not a modern circuit breaker box. A fuse box with little round screws, screw-in fuses. Not very accurate. There's a reason why we have different tech now. But, hey, it worked for the time. So this is the old farmhouse I grew up in, and it's out in the country, and it's barely there, but it's a house, and I'm a kid, so you don't know no better. Well, me and my stepbrothers, we're upstairs, and it's springtime. Parents are off to town to, get supplies and food and shit. I don't know. They could have been working or something. And with springtime, well, the wasps, there's some wasps in the house because they come every springtime. I don't know, they must winter in the walls or something, and then they fly out, and sometimes instead of them flying out of the house, they fly into the house. If you live in the country, you get bugs in the spring. It's just what it is. And we said, well, the best way to kill this wasp would be to take an extension cord, cut the end off of it, whittle it back a bit, twist them, and then electrocute the wasps. Yeah. So we did that. We took extension cord, cut the end off, took the rubber off each end, twisted the copper wire, pulled it back a little farther so we could have nice, good zappies, and plugged it in. Went and zapped the wasp. That was pretty good. Killed one of them. Shot some little copper BBs everywhere. Just a few. But that was fine. And go over to, because as you bring the wires right in on the wasp, you know, and the arcs through the wasp, and the wasp pops, and you stop, and it's all good. You know, because we're smart. We're making sure we're not touching the copper. We're touching the thin little rubber wire coating over the copper. And you go to the next one, and you go zap it. Zzz, but this one, you want to go in a little too fast, and the wires actually touch. So it's zzz, and as you pull it apart, is when pop, and there's little copper BBs fucking everywhere, and they're boiling molten hot as they fly on you too. And of course now there's no power in the house. And I'm like, okay, we go down in the basement. We know that it's the fuse box. And we're like, well, we'll just start the first one. Happened to be the first one, and it's unscrew it, and that's all brown and black and nasty. Or screw in a new one, because Dad had a pile of them sitting over on the side. Well, pile, it was like 2. And the other ones were different colored for the other holes. And so we do that, and we go back upstairs, and go zap another one. Zzz, 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 pop. Oh, shit. Okay, we go back downstairs. No more fuses. Well, what do? We can't, like, have half the electricity out in the house when the parents get home. They're going to know we were up to some shit that we weren't supposed to be doing, because fuses don't just pop on their own. And then I remember something that Dad said once, that they used to do a trick in cars and bypass a fuse box in a car by using a penny. Well, if it would work in a car, I wonder if it would work in a house. So, well, we put one penny in there, it wasn't quite thick enough. Put a second penny in there and screw one of the busted fuses in. Vroom, the house lights up just great as shit. Yeah, woohoo! It was a great tip. You can use a penny to skip any fuse. It's dangerous as hell, because now all those tube and wires that have been running through the house that no longer have oil-coated paper insulation, because that's even rotted off for 100 years. But it's just running through the house on every beam and rafter, and there's no fuse associated to it. So if there's a short, it keeps shorting until it becomes another 51,001 house fires that year. So we're like, oh, this ain't gonna be good. We go back upstairs and we keep doing it again till we get all the wasps. And, you know, it's much better that way, because now the fuse doesn't break when they touch. Now it just goes, and then you have to pull it apart, which puts copper BBs everywhere. And so we kill all the wasps. We're done with our fun. We unplug the extension cord. We throw that away so we don't get in trouble. We think everything's great. When stepbrothers leave and parents come home, and everything's great. And like a week or 2 weeks later, Dad happens to go in the basement for something, and he notices that one of the fuses is sticking out a little bit. You can just see that, you know, the glint on the metal of the other ones, the reflection from the lights and stuff, all same, and that one's different. Well, how's that one different? You know? And he's like, well, it can't be working if it's unscrewed 1/4 of an inch compared to the other ones. How's that one still working? Is his thought as he goes over there, unscrews it, and sees the pennies behind there. Oh, shit, and has to pull the main power, get a screwdriver to pry them out, because now it's run hot enough that they're like melted in place. And yeah, comes up and asks me how this happened, and so I was telling him we were zapping wasps. And then he proceeded to tell me how dangerous and dangerously, and how it should burn down the house and all, blah, 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 and everything else. But Yeah. I don't know. And the whole thing when it's going, "Nyeh." Yeah, that's really when it should have been electrocuting us. So, I guess we got lucky that day. Story of my life. All right, puff, puff, pass. No parking on the grass. I'm out of here. That was pretty good. Killed one of them. Shot some little copper BBs everywhere. Just a few. But that was fine. And go over to, because you bring the wires right in on the Wasp, and the arcs through the Wasp, and the Wasp pops, and you stop, and it's all good.